On Christmas Eve, I discovered the new family portrait above the fireplace, my face completely cropped out. The next morning, I handed my parents an envelope. "Don't open it here," I warned. They did anyway. My mom started crying. My dad went pale. The truth was finally out. I wish I could say I was shocked when I saw it. I wish I could tell you it came as a complete surprise, like some dramatic twist at the end of a movie. But honestly, it felt weirdly expected. I walked into my parents' living room, dusted the snow off my boots, looked up, and there it was. The photo, large, glossy, professionally framed, hung with intention and pride just above the fireplace like it was the crown jewel of our family's legacy. Everyone was in it. My mom in her favorite blue cardigan, smiling like she hadn't just spent decades sighing at everything that didn't involve my sister. My dad doing that awkward grin he only seems to pull out for photos and golf course selfies. And Scarlett, of course, front and center, wearing some cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my rent, with that fake candid pose she does where it looks like she's laughing at something charming and wholesome. Maybe a joke about her trust fund. And then there was no me. Not even shoved to the edge, not even blurred in the background, just gone. It wasn't a bad crop. It was a clean one, intentional, tidy, like I'd been photoshopped out of their lives as smoothly as possible. No smudges, no rough edges, just deleted. I stared at it for maybe 4 seconds, 5 tops, long enough for my stomach to knot, but not long enough for anyone to notice. Or maybe they did notice and just didn't care. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom called from the kitchen, like we were all one big happy family. I could smell rosemary and lemon from whatever she was roasting, holiday smells, comfort smells. I used to love those smells back when they still meant something. I hung up my coat, muttered a quick hello, and stepped into the kitchen. Scarlett was there, of course, swirling wine in a glass like she was hosting a segment on seasonal pairings. She kissed my cheek in that air kiss way she does now, just close enough for the gesture to register, just far enough to avoid touching me. "You made it," she said, like this was her house and I was late to an event. I didn't bother replying, just smiled the kind of smile you give when you've already screamed into a pillow 3 times this month and decided it wasn't worth wasting your voice. The house hadn't changed much since I was last here. Same antique clock on the wall that Dad refused to fix, still running 5 minutes fast. Same collection of Scarlett's childhood art framed in the hallway, her stick figures and finger paintings preserved like Picasso's. Nothing of mine, of course. My drawings had been put away for safekeeping years ago. That's code for thrown out when you weren't looking. I wandered back to the living room, pretending to admire the Christmas tree, while my eyes kept drifting back to that family portrait. The longer I looked, the more it felt like a perfect metaphor for my entire existence in this family. Present, but invisible. Included, but erased. My fingers brushed against the envelope in my pocket. Heavy ivory paper, embossed seal. I'd thought about giving it to them in the morning, after the stockings, after the cinnamon rolls, after the performance. But standing in that living room, looking at that photo, seeing my entire existence airbrushed out like a glitch in the family algorithm, yeah, I changed my mind. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. Carefully. Strategically. Like I'd been a bad brand partnership. I turned the envelope over in my hands. It felt heavy with the weight of everything unsaid, everything taken, everything hidden. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. Dinner was the usual performance. My dad carved the roast like he was auditioning for a Hallmark commercial. My mom complimented Scarlett's skincare routine twice. No one asked how I was. No one asked what I'd been doing or where I was living now. The only question I got was whether I still drove that little car, which is code for, "We have no idea what's going on in your life and we're hoping you'll fill in the blanks so we can pretend we care." I didn't fill in the blanks. Instead, I watched Scarlett unwrap a small something from Mom and Dad, a vintage gold bracelet. "Nothing fancy," Mom insisted, which was hilarious because the receipt was still folded under the tissue paper. and I caught the number. Let's just say I'd have to work a week and a half to afford it, and that's assuming I skipped groceries. "Oh my God, you guys," Scarlett beamed. "This is just... wow." "Thought you'd like it," Dad said, grinning like he'd just secured a merger. Meanwhile, I got a mug that said, "World's Okayest Daughter," which I'm sure was meant to be ironic. Or was it? Hard to say. "We saw it and thought of you immediately," Mom said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's perfect," I replied, matching her tone. "I'll use it at work." "How is work?" Dad asked, his voice carrying that slight inflection that always appears when he's making small talk with someone he barely knows, like a distant cousin at a funeral or the guy who details his car. Before I could answer, Scarlett jumped in. "Oh, did I tell you about the promotion? The firm is sending me to London next month for that conference. All expenses paid." And just like that, my job, the one I'd worked 80-hour weeks to secure, the one where I'd recently led a project that saved the company millions, evaporated from the conversation like it had never existed. "London." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom gushed, reaching across to squeeze Scarlett's hand. "We're so proud of you." I took a long sip of wine and wondered if they even remembered what I did for a living. Last Thanksgiving, Dad had introduced me to his golf buddy as Avery, she works in business, which was about as specific as saying I exist on planet Earth. "Pass the potatoes?" I asked, just to hear my own voice. Dinner dragged on. Mom talked about the neighbor's divorce like it was a personal affront to her. Dad complained about property taxes. Scarlett mentioned her followers had reached some milestone number, and both my parents nodded like she'd announced a cure for cancer. "Remember when Scarlett was on the local news for that charity thing?" Mom said, reaching for the wine. "We still have it recorded somewhere." "It was hardly anything," Scarlett said, in that way people do when they absolutely want you to contradict them. "It was impressive," Dad obliged. "Not everyone gets recognized like that." I bit my tongue, remembering the article I'd written last year that had been published in a major industry journal. I'd emailed them the link, no response. Not even a nice job text. After dessert, a chocolate torte that Mom made specifically because it's Scarlett's favorite, despite knowing I'm allergic to hazelnuts, I excused myself, saying I was tired. Mom offered me the guest room. Not my room. Not your old room. Just the guest room. Beige sheets, dusty bookshelf, one lamp that flickered if you breathed too close to it. "We turned your old room into Scarlett's home office," Mom explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "She needs the space when she visits. For work calls." "The guest room is fine," I said, because what else could I say? I shut the door behind me, turned on the lamp, which flickered on cue, and sat on the edge of the bed. That's when I pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting in my bag the whole time, thick ivory paper, embossed seal. That night, I lay in bed and let the house settle around me. Same creaky floorboards, same ticking wall clock somewhere in the hall. My dad was snoring. My mom's voice drifted up once, something about bringing the good plates tomorrow. Scarlett laughed in that practiced, breathy way of hers. The Golden Child soundtrack. I closed my eyes and thought about the years. The time I got into my dream college, and they said, "We're so proud," before immediately asking if I could defer a year so they could help Scarlett with her portfolio. The time I missed rent and called home, and Dad said, "Things are tight right now," while planning a cruise for her birthday. The time I brought home a boyfriend, and they forgot his name at dinner. He never came back. I didn't blame him. I was tired of telling myself I was just sensitive. Tired of pretending I misunderstood. That night, lying in a bed that was supposed to feel familiar but didn't, I stopped making excuses. Tomorrow I would give them the envelope. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't even raise my voice. I'd just smile, say Merry Christmas, and watch the truth do what years of silence never could. I woke up at 7:15 a.m. to the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee. For a split second before my eyes fully opened, I was 12 again. Excited for presents, for Mom's special breakfast, for that rare day when everything felt warm and right. Then reality settled in like a cold draft. The guest room, the envelope, the family portrait without me. I pulled on a sweater and jeans, ran a brush through my hair, and headed downstairs. The living room was already alive with Christmas music, Nat King Cole crooning about chestnuts, and Scarlett was sitting cross-legged by the tree in matching pajamas with Mom. They both looked up when I entered, their smiles faltering just slightly. "Morning," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "Merry Christmas." "There she is," Dad called from his armchair, newspaper in hand. "We were about to start without you." "Wouldn't want to hold up tradition," I replied, settling onto the couch. Mom handed me a mug of coffee. "2 sugars, right?" I take it black now, have for years. But I just nodded and set it aside. Breakfast was Mom's famous cinnamon rolls, bacon, and fruit salad. We ate from plates on our laps while Scarlett distributed the gifts. Mine was a small pile compared to the mountain in front of her, but I'd expected that. As I watched them, a memory surfaced. My 10th birthday. I'd asked for a bicycle for months, dropped hints, left magazine pages open, even wrote it on the family calendar. When the day came, I got clothes and a journal. Scarlett, who was 8, got a pink Schwinn with streamers and a basket the very next month, just because. I'd cried in my room that night. Mom found me and said, "Honey, you need to understand that your sister is different. She's special." As if I wasn't. The memory faded as Scarlett squealed over a pair of designer boots. "These are exactly what I wanted." "We know," Mom beamed. "You only mentioned it 5 times. I thought about my college graduation, how I'd scanned the audience during the ceremony, searching for my family's faces. They'd promised to be there, but when I walked across the stage, their seats were empty. Later I got a text. "So sorry, honey. Scarlett had a callback for that commercial. Couldn't miss it. We'll celebrate soon." We never did. I opened my gifts methodically. A generic scarf. A gift card to a store I never shop at. A book about finding your purpose that felt more like a pointed suggestion than a gift. "Thank you," I said after each one, my voice growing quieter. Another memory. My first apartment. I'd called Dad, asking if he could help with the security deposit. Just a loan until my first paycheck cleared. "We're a little stretched right now," he'd said. 2 weeks later, Scarlett posted photos of her new convertible. "Best surprise ever from the best parents." "Avery?" "Earth to Avery." Scarlett's voice pulled me back. "Mom asked if you want more coffee." "I'm good," I said, though my mug was still full and cold. After gifts, we moved to the dining room for a proper breakfast. Mom had set the table with the good china, the set she usually reserves for when Dad's boss comes over, or when Scarlett brings home someone she's dating. "So," Dad said, passing the syrup, "Scarlett tells us you're still at that same company." "No. Advancements?" The way he said it, like advancement was the only measure of worth, made my jaw clench. "I'm leading my own team now," I replied. "We just secured the Wilson account last month. It's the biggest client the firm has landed in 5 years. "Oh, that's nice," Mom said, her attention already drifting to Scarlett, who was showing her something on her phone. I remembered my high school art show, how I'd won first place for a painting I'd worked on for months. Mom and Dad had promised to come, but they called last minute. "Scarlett's not feeling well," Mom had explained. "You understand, right?" I found out later from a neighbor that they'd been at Scarlett's dance recital instead. They hadn't even bothered with a convincing lie. "I'm thinking of buying a house," I said suddenly, just to see if anyone was listening. "That's ambitious," Dad replied without looking up from his plate. "Real estate is tricky right now." "I know. That's why I've been saving for 3 years." No response. Just the clinking of forks against plates. I thought about Grandma's funeral last year. How I'd stood alone at the reception while Mom, Dad, and Scarlett huddled with the relatives, telling stories and accepting condolences. How no one had thought to introduce me to my own extended family. How Uncle Robert had asked if I was a friend from work. The envelope felt heavy in my pocket. After breakfast, while Mom and Scarlett cleared the table, I stepped back into the living room and stared at that family portrait again. The longer I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a photo. It was about 28 years of being the afterthought, the backup plan, the daughter they remembered to include when it was convenient. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them, all the times I'd convinced myself I was overreacting, all the times I'd swallowed my hurt and smiled anyway. But now I had proof, not just of their emotional neglect, but of something far more tangible, something they couldn't explain away with, "You're too sensitive," or "That's not how it happened." I fingered the edge of the envelope. Inside was the truth, cold, hard, and undeniable. A truth that would change everything. "Avery?" Mom called from the kitchen. "Could you help with these dishes?" "Coming," I replied, my decision made. It was time. "Actually," I said, stepping into the kitchen doorway, "I have something for all of you." Mom's hands paused in the soapy water. Dad looked up from his phone. Scarlett turned, a dish towel hanging limply from her fingers. "You didn't need to get us anything," Mom said, that practiced politeness in her voice. "It's not exactly a gift," I replied, pulling the envelope from my pocket. "But I think you'll find it illuminating." I moved to the dining table and sat down, placing the envelope in the center. They followed, curiosity overriding whatever else they'd planned to do. Dad sat first, then Mom, then Scarlett, who was already checking her watch like she had somewhere more important to be. "What's this about, Avery?" Dad asked, his CEO voice activated. I took a deep breath. "I saw the family portrait above the fireplace." A pause. Glances exchanged. "Oh," Mom said, her voice artificially light. "It turned out lovely, didn't it?" "I wouldn't know," I replied evenly. "I'm not in it." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Dad cleared his throat. Scarlett suddenly found her fingernails fascinating. "Well," Mom finally said, "you couldn't make the session. We had it scheduled for months, and you said you were busy with work." "I never received an invitation," I said. "Not a call, not a text, not an email." "I'm sure we told you," Dad insisted, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "You didn't," I said. "But that's not really the point, is it? The point is that you were perfectly comfortable hanging a family portrait without your eldest daughter in your living room. You were fine with that. You didn't think, hey, maybe we should wait and reschedule so Avery can be included. You just proceeded without me." Scarlett sighed dramatically. "Are you seriously making Christmas Day about your hurt feelings? Again?" I turned to her. "Again? When have I ever ruined Christmas?" "You always do this," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Make everything about you, create drama where there isn't any." That's rich coming from the person who's been the center of this family's universe since birth. "See?" Scarlett looked to our parents for support. "This is exactly what I mean. So bitter." I pushed the envelope forward. "Open it." Dad reached for it first, his brow furrowed. He broke the seal and pulled out the contents. Several sheets of paper, official-looking, with letterheads and signatures. "What is this?" he asked, scanning the first page. "DNA test results," I said simply. "And a copy of my original birth certificate." Mom's face went pale. Dad's hands tightened on the papers. Scarlett looked confused, then intrigued, then alarmed as she watched our parents' reactions. "I found out 6 months ago," I continued, my voice surprisingly steady. "I was donating blood and discovered I'm AB negative, a rare type, so rare that it's genetically impossible for 2 O-positive parents to have an AB negative child." Dad's jaw clenched. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I told myself it was a mistake," I went on, "that the blood bank got it wrong, so I took a DNA test, then another, then I requested my original birth certificate." I nodded toward the papers. "The results are consistent. You're not my biological parents." "Avery," Mom started, her voice breaking. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Just don't." 28 years, Mom. 28 years of feeling like I didn't belong, like I was somehow defective, like no matter what I did, it would never be enough. And all this time, there was a reason. We were going to tell you, Dad said, but the words sounded hollow. When? I demanded. When exactly were you planning to tell me I was adopted? After I turned 30? 40? When you were on your deathbeds? It's complicated, Mom whispered. No, it's actually very simple, I countered. You made a choice to hide the truth from me, and then you made another choice, to treat me differently than your biological child, to prioritize her, to celebrate her, to love her more. That's not true, Dad protested, but his eyes said otherwise. It is true, I insisted. Every birthday, every achievement, every milestone. Scarlett got the spotlight, the praise, the attention. I got the leftovers, the afterthoughts, the world's okayest daughter mugs. Scarlett was unusually quiet, her eyes darting between our parents, searching for denial that wasn't coming. We never meant to hurt you, Mom said, tears streaming now. Intention doesn't matter, I replied. The result is the same. I grew up feeling unwanted in my own home. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To a teenager? To an adult? Dad set the papers down, his face ashen. Avery, please, let's discuss this rationally. I am being rational, I said. More rational than I've ever been. For years I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't lovable enough. Now I understand. I was just a reminder of something you wanted to forget. That's not it at all, Mom insisted. Then what is it? I challenged. Explain to me why my sister got everything while I got scraps. Explain the forgotten birthdays, the missed graduations, the constant comparisons where I always came up short. We didn't, Dad began. You did, I cut him off. And that family portrait is just the latest example, the perfect symbol of how you see this family. Scarlett at the center, you two beaming proudly, and me. Nowhere. Erased. Like I never existed. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom was openly crying now. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Scarlett sat frozen, her usual confidence shattered. Who are my real parents? I finally asked, my voice softer now. Mom flinched at the word real. Your biological mother was my cousin, Dad said after a long pause. She was young, unmarried. It would have been a scandal back then. We had been trying for a baby for years with no success. It seemed like the perfect solution. A solution, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. That's what I was, a problem solved. No, a blessing, Mom insisted. We wanted you so badly. Just not as badly as you wanted Scarlett when she came along, I said. Your miracle baby, your real child. Avery, please, Dad pleaded. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations. It's too late for that. I just needed you to know, that I understand now why I've always been on the outside looking in. What do you want from us? Dad asked, his businessman instincts kicking in, looking for a solution, a way to fix this, to move on. I laughed, a hollow sound. That's just it. For once in my life, I don't want anything from you. Not your approval, not your attention, not your love. I'm done trying to earn what should have been freely given. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small wrapped package, placing it next to the envelope. Merry Christmas, I said. It's a frame for your perfect family portrait. With that, I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my coat from the hook, and headed for the door. Avery, wait! Mom called after me. Where are you going? I turned back one last time. Home, my real home, where I belong. And then I was outside, the cold December air filling my lungs, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, accusations, denials, 28 years of secrets finally exposed to the light. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to anymore. The drive back to my apartment was surreal. Christmas lights blurred past my windows as snow began to fall, soft, silent, and indifferent to the bomb I'd just detonated. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse. I ignored it. By the time I reached my building, the snow had picked up. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching the flakes accumulate on my windshield, feeling strangely calm. Empty, but calm. Like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar silence. No Christmas tree, no decorations. I hadn't bothered this year. Just my plants, my books, my space. Mine. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, finally checking my phone. 6 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad. 2 texts from Scarlett that simply read WTF and call me. I turned off my phone and curled up under a blanket, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, I woke to knocking, insistent rhythmic knocking that pulled me from a dreamless sleep. I shuffled to the door, peered through the peephole, and froze. Scarlett. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but she'd clearly seen the light under the door. I opened it just enough to see her face. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered cautiously, like she was entering a stranger's home. In a way, she was. "How did you find my address?" I asked. "Mom had it. From that time she sent you a birthday card." 3 years ago. At least someone had been paying attention. Scarlett stood awkwardly in the middle of my living room, examining everything with those critical eyes of hers. I waited for the judgment, the comments about my quaint space, or how I should really consider a statement wall. Instead, she said, "I didn't know." I blinked. "Didn't know what?" "That you were adopted. That they treated you differently." She sat down on my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "I mean, I knew they favored me, but I thought that was normal, that all parents have favorites." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Well, now you know." "After you left, it was chaos," she continued. "Mom was hysterical. Dad kept saying they did what they thought was best." I just sat there watching 28 years of family history rewrite itself in real time. "Sounds dramatic," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. It was. She looked up at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time. "I have questions." "So do I replied. "About 1,000,000 of them." "Did you hate me growing up?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, not vulnerability. "No," I said honestly. "I envied you. I resented you sometimes, but I didn't hate you." She nodded slowly. "I would have hated me." I moved to sit in the chair across from her. "It wasn't your fault. You were just a kid accepting the love you were given. We both were. But I never noticed. Or if I did, I never said anything. I just took it all. The attention, the praise, the opportunities. That's what children do," I said. "They don't question why they're loved. They just accept it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unsaid things between us. "They want to talk to you," Scarlett finally said. "They've been up all night, going through old photo albums, crying, arguing. Mom keeps saying she never meant for it to be like this." "What did they expect?" I asked. That I'd never find out? That I'd just keep accepting the scraps they threw my way forever? "I don't think they thought about it at all," Scarlett replied. "I think they just did what was easy. And what was easy was loving the child who looked like them, who acted like them, who didn't remind them of a secret they wanted to forget." Her honesty was disarming. This wasn't the Scarlett I knew, the perfect, polished golden child. This was someone else, someone real. "Are you going to talk to them?" she asked. I sighed. "Eventually. Not today. Maybe not this week. I need time." She nodded. "That's fair?" Then after a pause, "I brought you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn book, a photo album. She handed it to me, and I opened it cautiously. Inside were photos I'd never seen before. Me as a newborn, tiny and red-faced. Me taking my first steps. Me on a tricycle, grinning with a missing front tooth. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my throat suddenly tight. "Dad's study, in the bottom drawer of his desk. There's a whole box of them." I turned the pages slowly, drinking in these lost moments of my childhood. Evidence that I had existed, that I had been documented, even if those records had been hidden away. "Why would they keep these from me?" I whispered. "I don't know," Scarlett admitted. "But they kept them. They didn't throw them away." It wasn't much comfort, but it was something. "There's more," she said, reaching into her bag again. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this too. It's a letter, from your biological mother to Mom and Dad." My heart skipped. I took the paper with trembling hands and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. The date at the top was 3 days after my birth. "Dear Robert and Ellen," it began, "thank you for giving my daughter the home I cannot. Please tell her someday that giving her up was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most loving. Tell her I named her Avery because it means ruler of the elves, magical and strong. Tell her I think of her every day. Tell her I love her more than words can say." It was signed simply, Catherine. Catherine. My mother's name was Catherine. Tears spilled onto the page before I realized I was crying. Scarlett moved to sit beside me, her hand hesitantly touching my shoulder. "There's an address," she said softly. "It's probably outdated, but it's a start. If you want to find her." I nodded, unable to speak. "I'll help you," Scarlett offered. "If you want. I'm good at research." I looked at her, this sister who wasn't really my sister, this woman who had benefited from my exclusion her entire life, and saw something I'd never seen before. Remorse. And beyond that, a genuine desire to make things right. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you help me?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I've had everything handed to me my whole life, and I never questioned it. Because I've been the center of attention for so long that I forgot there were other people in the room. Because—" She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "Because you're my sister. And I've never really been a sister to you." The words hung between us, an acknowledgement and an apology all at once. "I'd like that," I finally said. "Your help." She smiled, a small, uncertain thing. "Good, that's good." We sat together in my quiet apartment, the snow still falling outside. These fragments of my past spread between us. Nothing was fixed, nothing was forgotten. But something had shifted, just slightly, like the first crack in ice that has been frozen solid for years. "What happens now?" Scarlett asked. I looked down at the letter in my hands, at the name of the woman who had given me life and then given me away. At the photos of a childhood I barely remembered. At the sister I never truly knew. "Now," I said, "we start over."